that 23-year-old kid in me that probably wouldn't have gotten as excited about business ownership and like developing my career if I didn't have that. And by the way, I thought I was going to own land a long time ago. I may not have been as excited if you had told me at 23, like, hey man, if you work really hard, 13 years from now, you can own your first farm. I would have been like, I think I'll just hunt public and hang out and I'm
Yeah.
good. The light at the end of the tunnel, like every little setback in my career, I'm really good at convincing myself that if I just do this one thing, I'll fix it this time and I'll get back on the right track. And frankly, that you have to have that spirit in any endeavor, I think.
What is going on? Welcome back to the Land Podcast, brought to you by Onyx. This week we have a different type of episode. I say that every now and then, but this one is with Matt Kline. Matt was the original founder of Exodus. I started there as an intern. For anyone that has followed along with my personal career journey, this is kind of where it started, along with Chad. So it's kind of a fun walk down memory lane to some degree, and also an update on how Matt positioned his career in order to buy 500 acres of ground in Kentucky. And basically, the first half of this conversation is about the career progression, different businesses, and then finding a business that works for him and what motivated him to do that. And the clear answer is obviously land. So I think there's some interesting perspective here on this for anyone that runs their own business, aspires to run their own business, and also for folks who want to consider utilizing seller financing, how to structure that, and how to identify potential opportunity, how to structure a deal when you feel like you're paying at market or slightly above market. We dive into all of that here on this episode. And if you are buying a new farm this year, or you bought one within the last 3 years, I encourage you to check out ASM Labs. They're the tax soil guys, and Section 180 is a huge opportunity for any farmer operators, guys buying ground with tillable ground, pasture ground, and you intend to still use it for farming purposes. This is a very, very great opportunity for you guys to learn more about it. And if you bought something in the past, you have some soil samples, or you simply want to learn more, I encourage you to reach out to Alec Bean. He's the tax soil guy. So reach out to him. There's some pretty big savings opportunities for different parts of the country. And a lot of the listeners, there's been listeners that have utilized this and have reached out and said, hey, thanks for letting me know that this is a thing. And it worked out really well for them. So encourage you to take a look into that. And then really quickly, Moultrie had a bunch of different projects and things going on here. We have the Edge 3, the Edge Solar. And on top of that, they actually have a crazy deal at Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. You can buy 2 Edge 2s for $79.99. So basically 2 cameras, $40 a piece. If you want to add a few more cameras to your fleet, I think this might be the cheapest you'll be able to buy an Edge 2. And you can do that at basically Bass Pro Shops or Cabela's if they're nearby. And I think they're even doing it online as well. So huge opportunity to add some more cameras. And we're going to be doing an event to kick off this season with Onyx. And so I am nailing down these final details. And by next week's episode, I will have all of the details for you. We're going to be premiering a episode of Whitetail Cribs. We're going to have some free gear. It's going to be local to me. So it's going to be in Henry, Illinois. And if you're in the area and you listen to this podcast, it's going to be free. It's going to be likely September 5th in the evening. And if you want to come out, hang out for a couple hours, Onyx is putting on a free event, and I would love to see you guys, and we can talk about land, and we can all watch a very exciting episode of Whitetail Cribs. So that is all I have for now. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Kick it off strong here, and let's get into this conversation with Matt Kline. Matt, welcome to the Land Podcast. This has been not a format I necessarily really anticipated, so this is gonna be fun.
Yeah, no, I'm excited about this, man.
Yeah,
really excited.
So which is interesting. So I graduated from college at Exodus. You were the original founder, you, Chad, and Steve, and you guys hired me as an intern. And I started fresh out of college, and that's when I met you, right? And then now, you fast forward 8 years, 9 years, however long it's been, and you've kind of went down a different career path. And so it's going to be interesting to kind of recap the progression of your career. And then you bought a big farm in Kentucky, which is, the root of this conversation. But who are you, for people who maybe missed the Exodus stuff at the very beginning?
I think a lot of days I'm still trying to figure that out, Jake.
Fair.
Yeah, no, that kind of introduces the conversation well. And frankly, it's funny because this is like one of like 5 times that you and I have talked in the last few years. So it is surreal for it to be in this context. It's cool, man. But no, I'm Matt Kline. Um, I am 35. Grew up in Western Maryland, and I guess at this point in my career, I guess serial entrepreneur is the best way to describe the career that I have strung together. um, Besides my wife, our 3 awesome kids. I mean, my my 2 like competing passions in life have been bow hunting whitetails and starting and visualizing businesses and then trying to kind of get them out of the ground. And yeah, and so that kind of crossed our paths during the first big business that I think, looking back, the first big success, if you will, or at least early success with Exodus. We started Exodus in 20. The conversations began in late 2014. Like I met Chad in September, I believe, of 2014. We both got into hunting lease in Southern Ohio. I was still working. I'm a 3rd-generation electrician, so I graduated high school. Like most ADHD entrepreneurial types, I had no direction or path in life. Went into the electrical trade. Um, Second guessed it every week or day for about 7 years, and got married really young, and was in the trade and like not sure this is where I want to go, but was also trying to provide for my family. And I would try little businesses on the side, never could quite get something running. And then in 2014 I was 24, and I met Chad, and Chad was, I think, 30 at the time, somewhere in that range. Chad was a little older, but um, we met on that lease and both had very similar ambitions when it came to both whitetails and where we wanted to go in life. And at that time, this whole like entrepreneurial, community online was just not, it wasn't thriving like it is today. And so I was the only person under 30 that I knew that was thinking about, I got to get ahead. I got to figure out how to start a side hustle or a business or this thing or that thing. And when I met Chad, he very much had that same, mentality, and was talking about different things that he was looking into. And at the time, my side hustle was I was running this little Amazon business where I would, arbitrage, buy products that I could find for cheap online or at retail stores or whatever, and sell them on Amazon. And it was the first little side hustle that I'd created where I was actually really starting to get some traction. And I was telling Chad about it, and we kind of connected over that, and we hunted together that fall. And then in January, after the season had ended, I got really serious about, okay, I think I want to be an entrepreneur, and I'm gonna like really try to make a run at it. And so I started thinking about this Amazon business that I was doing, which at that time had almost matched my income from my day job. And I was like, there's something here. I got to figure out how to do it. And so I started thinking about products, and products led me into some podcast I think I listened to at the time that was like, you need to find your passion and do something around your passion. So I was like, well, what am I passionate about? I'm not passionate about, working construction every day of my life. Um, the only thing I really feel passionate about is deer hunting besides my family. And so I started thinking about hunting products and, is there a product that we could make in the hunting space that could be successful? And not to bore you with all the details, but after going through this process of elimination of understanding, okay, what is a product that I feel like is gaining market share in that space that's not $10, that actually sells for a good price point and um, is shippable and has like a small footprint and could be sent through Amazon pretty easily. Because at the time, that's still where my mindset was at. And I came to this realization. It was like, oh, cameras. And so I arrived at that business idea kind of for all the wrong reasons. And I was like convinced that like, oh, this is the way to go. We should start a camera company. And I think Chad and I caught up at some point, and I was like asking him what he was working on, and he was asking me about what I was working on. And I was like, hey, man, I want to do this. Do you have any interest? And he did. And so that's where kind of the basis for Exodus started. And then over time, over those first few months of starting to get a hold of developers and how we would, engineer a product like that, then I started to put on my hat of like, well, what's wrong with trail cameras? And so we started to actually, try to solve a problem versus we arrived at the product for all the business reasons. But then once we actually got into it for the right reasons, which was where's the hole in the market right now and what is the problem that we can solve for? At that time, trail cameras were junk. I mean, every one that I bought I had issues with, and so we started to kind of see an opening to build
Hmm.
a product that was better, better mousetrap. So that led me through, we launched that business and things at the time, it was like a dream come true. The business was really taking off. And within the first 6 months of launching our first camera with Exodus, I left my job, moved to Ohio, and that was a dream come true. Growing anybody who's listening to this podcast that grew up on the East Coast that ever gets the chance to move to the Midwest, it is a very surreal honeymoon period for about 2 years of like wow, I'm actually a thick of them now. And so we went through that whole journey, and yeah, obviously I think year 2 is that about the time that we met?
Yeah.
I feel like it
Well,
was that
so
first ATA show that year after, right?
yeah, it could have been. So I know I wrote an article for Wide Open Spaces, like right when you guys launched, and I was like, 5-year warranty. I remember like these guys are nuts. That's like that you can't do that. You can't do it. And so I remember like very similar, like from an entrepreneurial standpoint. I was literally roofing in the college summer, and I was making more money writing articles online than I was roofing. And that's like I'm picking up shingles off the ground. Like, why am I doing this? This is so.
But
But I wanted to.
if you were like me, you probably had a dad that was like, well, that's what you do. And you're not, you know, until you have a clear path. Like my dad was very much like, didn't see the value in income that wasn't tied to like something tangible. So that was tough.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always just had a really strong work ethic. And so I think that's part of it. I like to be busy too. And so I remember we were renting a house and I roofed all day and I did a phone interview and I still think I have that old phone. I could probably dig up the phone interview. And so that was when that was my first interaction with Exodus. I got one of the first cameras that's in my office now. And,
That's cool.
and so that was probably 2016, I would say, probably the summer of 16. Yeah. And then stayed in touch very loosely. And then, I'll let you pick it up from there.
Yeah, I remember I can't remember if it was that first or second ATA show. I feel like maybe it was the second in
Hmm.
Indianapolis.
Yeah,
So
probably.
that
Yeah.
would have been, I think that would have been 2017, January
Yeah.
2017. So we'd
Yep.
been in business for about a year and a half at that point, or product launched about a year and a half at that point. And we were starting to hit kind of that first ceiling. I think at the time we were at like $400,000 or $500,000 in revenue. And we were starting to hit the first ceiling of like, how do we scale this thing? How do we
Yeah.
grow? And and you obviously we had talked at that point, and but then we met, and I remember you came and met with us, and you pitched us on doing social media or managing our Instagram page.
Yeah.
And at the time, I felt like I was just I don't know which way to go. I'm trying to figure out how to get this thing scaled. And you know, a $500,000 annual revenue company that's selling a $200 product, that's a lot of moving parts. Today, that doesn't sound like a large company to me, and it's not. But
Hmm.
at the time, as a first-time entrepreneur, not really knowing what you're doing, it was like I I have learned about myself that I'm very much like I need to be able to work on one thing at a very deep level for a while and then move the ball to a point on that and then take on something else. And I remember you came and met with us, and I was feeling like pulled in 500 different directions. You were like, let me take Instagram off your hands. And I was like, sure. Yes, by all means.
Yeah.
And you did, and you did a really great job with it. Um, and I almost feel like that had happened before then. And then there was an ATA show there. I feel like this is now I'm remembering. And then you
Yeah.
came and met with us and we're like, hey, I'm graduating college now. Would you want would you hire me? And
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of the ways I was making decisions back then was like gut instinct. And I remember we sat down for like 30 minutes at a cafeteria table at the ATA show, and we were not going into that ATA show like we need to hire people. We were there like networking, trying to find, uh, and then I remember having that meeting, and afterward I was like, Chad, we need to find a way to hire him. And we had no budget. We had we had not discussed this. And we did. Somehow we like made the call and made it happen. And Chad really, I think saw that in you also, that you had a hard work ethic. And yeah, anyway, for
It's
anybody that
weird.
has any interest
Yeah.
in getting into the hunting industry, that might be a helpful
Yeah.
story, because you were doing the due diligence. You were persistent. I remember that vividly,
Yeah.
because when you're in that space, you're constantly getting asks from for sponsorship money, for free product, for whatever. And I always remember that about those early conversations we had with you was everything you did, you came to the table with a problem that you had done some pre-thought on about how we like things we were probably dealing with, and you had a solution for that problem. And I will never forget that, because that was so rare. It's still in the business that I run today. That is so rare that it really stands out. So that's
Yeah.
take that memento for whatever it's worth. But
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty funny, and it's crazy just how much times change, and like I think of this feverishly learning as much as I could, just about marketing, and business in general, and then I look back at like the bag of tricks in 2017. Oh, dude, those are all aged. You can't do any of those tricks anymore. And I'm talking about like the actual tactical things that go into a
yeah,
business and like trying to scale things. Like, I wish I had the skill sets I have now to go back in 2017
yeah.
and
Every
yeah.
Instagram post you made for us had like 37 hashtags on it.
They were all data driven too.
Yeah, for sure.
but so I think I appreciate that, and I think that's it was a really cool opportunity, and I think obviously it pointed me down a direction to where I'm at today, and just like one thing always kind of just led to another, professionally and everything else. So getting back to your story and your progression kind of like throughout your career, because I think it's interesting too, because I think we talked about this very briefly earlier this week, is like when you go through a transition, or like you get a result that you didn't want, it's I like winning and I hate losing. And when you take
Yeah,
an L, it sucks. Like, people can say, oh, it's okay, you learned something, and I do believe that. But at the end of the day, like, it's still an F on your report card, and it sucks. Like, that's not what you were striving for. If you want to know where property boundaries are for public or private, you want to develop a great plan for your farm, document perfect access to a blind, to a tree stand, carve out and measure food plots, connect your Moultrie trail cameras to an app that shows exactly where they're at, and you can look at the feed for that specific camera location, then Onyx is something you need to check out. It is the only mapping software I use when it comes to deer hunting. I've tried other pieces of software, different apps, and I always go back to Onyx because I think it is the most comprehensive, easy to use, and robust mapping software there is when it comes to hunting and land ownership. You want to send a pen to a friend, boom, send it to them right to text, opens it up. Maybe you have notes, maybe you have pictures on that pin, transfers all of it. You want to send a whole entire folder of a plan that you mocked up, you can do that on Onyx. So be sure to check out Onyx. They are a huge supporter of the Land Podcast. They allow us to travel around and talk to some folks that can give you really good insight and good information no matter where you're at in your process of buying land. Let's get back to the conversation.
I think the thing that, yeah, and I can talk about the transition out of that time period, why I left Exodus, and kind of the steps in career since then. But like, so over those couple years, Exodus still feels like a really big period of my life, but it's been 10 years.
It's crazy.
It's been 10 years since we started it.
Yeah.
Um, it feels like the period of time since I've left there to now is the same amount of time that I was there. But it's been 7 years since I left, and I was only there for 3 years. So maybe that's something to do with getting older and just getting more busy in life. But that period of time has really had an imprint on me. And we grew the company a little bit in that year and a half or so after you came on board. Um, but I think so I ended up leaving. I know I've watched the video that you guys had put out on the website or somewhere about the Exodus story, and I thought Chad summed it up really well. It's like there were just differences in visions about where the company could go. And you know me, like I am a visionary person. I am coming up with 1,000 ideas all the time. And that is not to my benefit most of the time. So I think for those first couple of years, I really had a very clear vision on where we were going, and there was momentum. And then we kind of hit a ceiling where it was like, okay, in order to get past the ceiling, we've got to do something different than we've been doing. And then I kind of spun my wheels in like, so what is that next thing? And I can remember a period of like a trade show season where I remember being at shows with you and like I had so many different ideas for where we could go that at some point it got to like, okay, well, we just need to pick a path and like go on it. And there was definitely like a spinning in the mud season there at Exodus, I think, for probably the last 12 months that I was there. We knew that there was a realization that we needed a lot more capital than we had. And, there was just different things. The market was changing. Everything was going cellular. We didn't have that skill set in-house. We really needed to go out and find that skill set. And you would probably agree with this, Jake. Like at that time, at least, I was a brand and like, I was more sales and marketing thought process,
Yeah.
branding, different models that we could run. Then I was the guy that could go out and like find the right talent and put them in place. Like Chad had that skill set a lot more than I did, I think, at the time. So like in that last year, I remember coming up with like 12 different product lines. We got very close to launching a few of those.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of like this. And I think
Boulder e-bikes, I think would have crushed.
I agree. Looking back on it, they weren't bad ideas.
Yeah.
It just is like I was so confused at what the right move was at the time. And when you start talking about bringing other people's money in, it's like you really can't be confused. You need like a laser clear path, and this is how we're moving forward. Um, I've learned a lot of. I think we talked about this a little bit not that
Mhm.
long ago. It's like I think there's lessons there that could apply to a lot of businesses. But it was time. So in that last 12 months, I kind of saw the writing on the wall that really what Exodus needed, I didn't have the skill set for at the time. And so I left, and I think that was the right move for me. I think it was the right move for you guys, and we've obviously stayed. I consider us good friends collectively, all of us,
Mhm.
through the years. And frankly, for 6.5 years after that exit, I was really proud of you guys and everything that you did. And I know that you guys took that business so much further than I could have. And um, you know, I think it's really cool. So that's kind of my piece on Exodus.
Mhm.
Beyond that, I left that business. And I'll tell you the difference, I think, in the last 7 years is at that time, I thought that businesses needed ideas, like standout ideas, and a little bit of like luck and
Oh, yeah.
timing
Yeah.
to go like do the thing that you always want for a business to go, 8 figures, 9 figures, and the whole like, right? I think I left there feeling like in hindsight that it wasn't like the cards just didn't go my way. It was actually a personal failure. And so that 3 years actually really shaped me because I started to take a hard look in the mirror and say, okay, what skills did I not have? What disciplines what was it that I didn't have, that I didn't possess there, that I need to develop now to keep moving forward. And um and I feel like the last 7 years of my career has been an exercise in just developing those muscles. And I personally now believe that like ideas are really secondary. Like I genuinely believe that any business will work if you have the right game plan, and you execute it right, and you don't let up. You don't change the plan 100 times like I was doing in those days.
Hmm.
And so it's come full circle. Just to kind of give a high level overview. This I joined a basically a private equity group. Um, wasn't like that's what we were calling ourselves at the time, but looking back on it's really what it was. Except for we didn't take from endowments or anything like that, but it was private money that was building franchise gym businesses. So I joined a company in Ohio. Happened that they were opening a location in my local market. I met the operating partner of that business, and um, he was about 6 or 7 years older than me, so still pretty close in age. And I could tell he was light years ahead of me on the entrepreneurial journey. And it was right at the time that we were kind of we were shaking hands at Exodus, and I met this gentleman, and I was like, okay, I think this is the person that I need to learn from. He was a former Marine Corps officer and was just building a systemized, scalable business, and they were taking off. So I went to work at that company. I ended up growing through that business and replacing that individual who grew to become an investor outside of day-to-day operations. And I became the operating partner at one time over 30 gym locations across Ohio and Pennsylvania. Moved my family to PA, and in that season I learned what it was like to operate a business that was franchised. So you don't control the business model, you don't control, you know you don't change direction for where that brand is going and all of that. You just execute the game plan at a really high level. You try to find the right people, you take care of customers. And so we did that for, I was in that business for almost a little over 5 years. And so I did that, became a partner. And then we, uh, that business got sold in 2022. Well, right into 2023. I was kind of in the process of stepping down as operating partner, moved back home, and learned a lot from that experience. And then now, fast forward today, I
Real quick,
operate a
was
yeah.
that a successful exit? Like, was there like an earnout phase, or was there like a vesting period throughout that process? I think that would be interesting for people to know.
Yeah, so I invested capital into the business to become a partner. So what they had done in Ohio was a really, I was kind of late in the game to that. I think I came on, we had like 12 locations in Ohio. I was an employee, became the operations director for the state, and we went from 12 locations when I came on to 20. And then I really wanted to I wanted a piece of the pie, right? And at that point, I was 10 years into knowing like my ultimate goal is to have 1,000 continuous acres of whitetail habitat somewhere. I'm not going to get there as a W-2 employee. Um, and I think that's even truer today. I knew I needed to get into the action. And so I kind of took basically everything I had and put it into the business, moved my family to Pennsylvania and said, hey, I'll take a risk. Let somebody else operate the state of Ohio. I'll help train them. And then I'll take a risk and move to another state to recreate what we've done here if you give me a piece of the action. And that's exactly how that happened. Um, it was a successful venture and exit. It could have been more. At the same time, the partners were um, building other businesses that I think kind of took on more of that focus. And I don't blame them. The businesses that they started kind of investing in and building at that time had a lot more potential and opportunity. Like they got into to be the franchisor rather than franchisee for what we were doing at the time. And so over the course of about 5 years, it went from like, this is the main focus, the priority, to this business kind of being secondary to other ventures. And so that I had kind of made the decision. When I moved to Pennsylvania, I had a 3-year employment agreement, and there were metrics and all kinds of stuff around that. We went through COVID, which I don't know if you guys know this, but was not particularly fun for the gym industry.
Right.
So we battled through that. Opened 8 locations in about 3 years. All of those locations were a financial success. And then I could have stayed on longer and had more opportunity there, but I was a very minority partner at that point, and I felt like at that time I could see the writing on the wall that this wasn't a main priority anymore. And I felt like it might have been it, it might have been egotistical to think this, but I felt like I had learned what I needed to learn from that business to go do something on my own and probably have a greater upside opportunity.
Mhm.
And that's a bet that I think you have to make on yourself sometimes. But yeah, so that's kind of what my next step was, and we can get into that if you want. I don't know how much we want this podcast to
No,
be
I'm just curious. It's good
business
to catch
wise.
up here. Yeah, yeah. I think it's setting the stage because you mentioned something of owning 1,000 acres and having the realization that more than likely you're going to have to basically be the driver of your own life and not waiting for raises or bonuses or things of that nature. So I think um, it's like I think a lot of people wish that they could own a big farm, and
Yeah.
like I wouldn't say it's a secret, but it's kind of the hard truth of, man, if you want to own a farm of that size, you're going to have to get creative how you're going to reach that goal, because the traditional path is not going to get you to an untraditional goal.
Well, I was probably 23 until I realized that I could potentially own 1,000 acres at some point in my lifetime.
Hmm.
Like I probably started reading quality whitetails and QDMA stuff when I was in my teens, like 17 is probably about the time that I started thinking about killing bigger deer and all of that. And that's probably a younger age today.
Hmm.
But you would read magazines and stuff and it would talk about a square mile, or, that until you get to 800 acres, you really can't
Man,
hold
it's
deer on your
yeah,
farm.
yeah.
So I remember some point in there, it'd be like, man, can you imagine having 1,000 acres? And when I was 21 or 22, I started a QDMA co-op in my neighborhood,
Hmm.
and I held this hearing one night and was like, hey, anybody who's interested, I put it in the local paper. Anybody who's interested in talking about quality deer management, we're doing this thing at the bar down the street. And that first night, like 20 people showed up.
No kidding.
And it was wild, and I was really excited about it. But I'll never forget a guy who came in, and I was writing down, now how many acres is your farm, so we could kind of get like a total. And almost everybody was like, we got 38, we've got 72. And this guy comes in and he's like a little over 1,000. And I was like, who is this guy? I want to know. And that moment, if I looked back, was like, okay, that's what I want. That's what
Hmm.
I want to get to. And I really thought that anybody who owned that kind of land had to have done it before land cost money, when it was like $100 an acre and you bet the farm in a poker game on Thursday night because it didn't mean anything. Then I started to realize that no, there's actually people out there like buying farms in this market right now. And this was 15 years ago. But I started to realize that people are doing it. And then I started to think about like, well, what would I have to do to get lucky enough to make enough money to buy that kind of farm? And that's where that is literally the thing that drove me to get into business, was wanting to own a big farm.
Yeah.
And then you see guys like at that time, Bill Winke was doing Midwest Whitetail, and Grant Woods had Growing Deer TV. And I would watch those shows and be like, this is it. I mean, this is the dream. But nobody
Yeah.
was talking about how they did it at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
So
I think that's fascinating. I think I've wanted to formulate some form of a documentary of like whitetails being the most motivating animal in the country because you like a lot of sometimes like would I do all this if I didn't love whitetails? Or like would I think you could go down the list of a lot of those people like some of those guys might have been a bum if it wasn't for whitetails.
1,000%, man.
And
Myself,
so
myself included, by the way. 100%.
fair, fair. And so you get out of the gym business, successful exit, and then you transition into what you're doing today. Is that right?
Yeah. So it's kind of funny. It came full circle. I, again, I'm a third generation electrician. Um, I I actually really love the electrical trade and, the trades in general. I grew up working on houses with my dad, pretty much being forced to when I didn't want to, but that was just what we did on the weekends. But then I graduated high school, and in my area, if you're going to be in the trades, you're going down the road. And so when I graduated high school, I was driving 2 hours to DC or Northern Virginia, or there was not a job site within 20 miles of my house. And so my experience in the trade was construction and a lot of time traveling. And so full circle is that when I was in the process of getting out of the gym business, I was kind of not sure where I wanted to go next. I knew that the money that I had made at that point, I wasn't going to reinvest into another business. That I wanted to find something that I could do that didn't require, like when we would open a gym, it's a $400,000 investment. I didn't want to put that kind of capital on the line to risk to start another business because I didn't want to risk going back to zero. So I was like, what can I do that's low investment that um, I another realization I had was I wanted to be high ticket, meaning I don't want to sell $30 gym memberships. At that time, I realized I have a pretty good skill set in sales. I think it's probably just as hard for me to sell a $30 gym membership as it is for me to sell something for a couple $1,000s. So I decided that whatever I did, I was going to be higher ticket, and I wanted to be in a supply constrained business or industry more than a demand constrained business or industry. Because looking back on Exodus, that was a demand constrained business. There's lots of supply, all fighting for the same number of individuals buying trail cameras every year. And you got to be on your game if you're going to stand out in a really noisy market. And even then, the fragmentation that happens, it makes it really tough to build a scalable business. So, same thing with the gym business. We actually learned something that was a um, really turned the tides for us, which was in the gym business, we learned that that's a very noisy space. There's a lot of competitors' supply, if you will, um, in most larger markets. But when we would go into towns of 10,000 people or less, a lot of times they didn't have a professional gym. It would be a mom or pop that wasn't open 24/7, had outdated equipment and that kind of thing. So we could come in and open an Anytime Fitness in a market that was hungry for it. We had zero competitors essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really the gas on the fire for that business. And so I felt like I needed to find the same thing. It's like I need a niche or an industry that is underserved and has a lot of demand. Um, and so that's what led to coming back home. My dad was in the process of shutting down his electrical construction business after, you know, 30 years in the trade. He was getting beat up pretty badly in the construction business, and he was kind of unsure where he wanted to go next and what he wanted to do next. And I happened to meet a plumbing business owner that does 100% residential service, and I started talking to him about his business model, and it caught me because he was talking about memberships. And I know I'm going into the weeds here about business, but I had just gotten in 5 years of being in the gym industry, I personally had sold probably 10,000 gym memberships. Maybe not quite that many, but several thousand at a minimum. And And that was what we did. And so I met this plumbing business owner. He's talking to me about his model for residential service, about memberships that he gets his customers into. And one of the things that our investment group loved about the gym business was recurring revenue. And so I'm like hearing what this guy's telling me. His average job's a couple $1,000s. He sells 35, 40% of his customers into a membership program. So he's got recurring revenue on the back end. And I just started like, we talked about this the other night. I don't typically count other people's money anymore, but I started like back of the napkin, like, this sounds like a really good, his customer acquisition cost was like $100. And I'm like, whoa. And I went into one of those entrepreneurial periods where I went home and like didn't sleep for like 4 or 5 days, just like doing research, running numbers. And I went to my dad and was like, I think we should build another electrical business. And he was like, what are you talking about? You've never had interest in my trade. And I was like, well, think about this. Did I not have interest in your trade, or was it that I didn't love driving down the road and doing large construction? Because I love when we would go out and hang out on the weekends and wire people's garages and listen to music and like joke around and have fun. I didn't love the big commercial side of it. And so we started conceptualizing what that could look like. And it's been off to the races ever since. So I've been in this business. It'll be 3 years in January. So
It's very cool.
this is kind of iteration number 3, and yeah, it's grown faster than I would have imagined. So
Yeah. And so when did, throughout this process of, transitioning into the electrical business, when did you start farm shopping? You're like, hey, I got a little extra coin in my pocket from this working really well.
yeah, I mean, for me, it was about cash flow, because in the gym business, that cash flow I didn't own, right? So I didn't get to decide what to do with that cash flow. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to venture out on my own, was because toward the end of the gym business, we were in some pretty significant cash flow, but the board would vote on that once a quarter or so and would say, like, here's where we want to reinvest those funds. And literally every dollar would get reinvested into the business. Yeah, more CapEx, more. And we just played that game for 5 years. Not a single distribution for 5 years. And that gets, to the operator, that gets tiring after a while.
Yeah.
And so I started to conceptualize when we started to hit a period of pretty consistent cash flow. It's one of the things I love about our business is I can control the consistency. It's not necessarily based on the economy and big project starts and, you know, interest rates and that kind of thing. All of our jobs are repairs and replacements that need to happen, whether it's, 6% interest rates or 0% interest rates. And so we can create demand just by how well we're getting referrals and how we're driving things. And so our cash flow looks like this instead of like this.
Yeah.
And so when I started to recognize that we've got pretty strong cash flow and it's consistent, I started to conceptualize that, okay, well, I need a system for how we manage cash flow. And I just personally decided that we're going to take money off the table every month, because I don't want to get into another situation where it's been 3 years and I'm not seeing any kind of like return from this
Mhm.
massive emotional, like, uh, uh, punching bag that you feel like you're going through, um, on a month by month basis. So when we started taking money off the table or having a consistent way to take cash flow out of the business, um, I started to think about, wow, I always kind of thought about buying a farm as I got to have a large lump sum. And I've shopped real estate before, and when it comes to raw land, I've had banks tell me 20%. I've had banks tell me up to 50% that I'm going to need to put down. And so I always thought about it like that. And then from my borrowing power, I've got 3 kids, my wife. I can't not have a house or have that affect my debt to income. because I want to have a farm. And so I got creative and was like, well, if I could seller finance something that fits within this percentage of the monthly cash flow, then I could go out and make a bigger decision than what I was thinking about doing, which was I'll go out and buy 50. And then if the next year things go well, maybe I can buy the neighboring 50. But you and I both know that the chances of that happening are so low, and you almost always have to overpay to acquire your neighbor's property. So I kind of came up with the solution that I'm going to take a certain threshold that I'm comfortable with, and I'm going to go out and try to seller finance a bigger piece to kind of build into over the next 5 years. And that's exactly what I did, which was, try to find a seller finance piece.
Buck Land Funding. If you don't know who they are and you're looking to buy a piece of ground, I encourage you to reach out to them. They're chartered in multiple states across the Midwest, and they understand recreational land. I've said it a million times here on the podcast. The most important piece of buying your first piece of ground is finding a partner, finding a bank that understands what you're trying to do, that has competitive rates and understands the world of recreational land, because not all banks are created equal, and Buck Land Funding understands our crazy goals of scooping up a piece of ground to enjoy it with family, to hunt it, to use it as an investment. They understand that and work with that every single day. I encourage you to reach out to them. If you're in the process of buying your first or 20th farm, reach out to Buck Land Funding at bucklandfunding.com. Back to the conversation. How did you target potential seller finance? Because typically there's a term. I've heard attorneys say this, like, man, if they can't go to the bank and get money, why should you be the bank? And I've been in the room where, that's being told to the seller. There's benefits.
Absolutely.
We've talked about, on the podcast, we've talked about the benefits to a seller, benefits to the buyer of seller financing, the risk on really the buyer side on seller finance. But how did you find someone that's like, hey, yeah, that sounds good. Steady income of this over this period. Like, what did that look like?
I've kind of found a few of these deals. The one that I ended up going with, I'll tell you up front, like, they were looking for it.
Mm.
So and whether they were looking for it or that they were completely open to it, had already discussed it. That one wasn't that hard, but I had found a few other deals, and even rewinding a bit, this is something I've had in my mind for a while. I just never pulled the trigger on because I didn't have access to the cash flow of the businesses that I was operating. Exodus, all cash flow went back into development and trying to grow, right? And we just weren't at that stage yet. And then the second business, I wasn't the decision maker there. But during the gym business, I wanted to do something like this. And so I had sought some people out in our area. I was watching prices go up. I was trying to figure out how to make a deal happen. And what I found was farmers specifically always want to find a way to get around paying Uncle Sam. And they are really creative at figuring out ways to make that happen. So I had talked to a few farmers that had, more tillable ground in central Pennsylvania that, had suggestions for me on how we could structure a deal, whether that was through, a lease purchase option, or that was actually a purchase agreement, but, was structured in a way that, and there were just different things that we had worked through. Anyone that I've dealt with that is a business owner, to include farmers who also obviously are running a different kind of business, but I've found a lot more flexibility on that side. I don't know about you, but that's what ended up happening with the piece that I bought. Piece that I bought is 506 acres. I did it in two separate transactions. I bought 160 last July. Business was at one stage, and we were I was still trying to make sure this thing's good to go. After another year of growth and seeing the consistency, this year I bought 340. But I bought that off of a gentleman who is an investor, bought a 4,000 acre timber company property, and loves buyers like me as he starts to slowly subdivide it. Mm-hmm. He's subdividing it in tracts of 200 to He just sold one the other day. I have a new neighbor that bought 1,500 acres off of him, and he loves the annuity of having that cash flow for the next, however many years. For me personally, I seller finance for 15 years,
Hmm.
but he was willing to go to 30, which
That's
is which
that's
is
interesting.
unheard of. But
Yeah.
I think a smart seller understands the benefit there to them.
Hmm. Well,
I don't think it can be I don't think it can be like, if I bought a farm, 100 acres, I saved up my life savings, put it into that 100 acres. Now I'm going to flip it and sell it 10 years later or 5 years later. I would have a hard time, So I just think it takes the right seller.
hmm yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of benefits to the seller in that structure. How did you guys establish the interest rate for that? Was that a point of negotiation? Was it prime? Um, what did that look like? Is it floating?
So I paid top of market for the price per acre, right?
Hmm.
Um, Several reasons for that. I probably could have negotiated more on that side, but it's 16 minutes from my wife's family. It's 5 minutes from the interstate, and it's in an area that's developing, and uh, probably 20 miles from the Ohio River. I've watched Ohio since I moved out of Ohio in 2018 go from, I, I was looking at tracks trying to figure out how to buy them with no money for 1,200 an acre. Those same tracks are selling for 4,000 an acre now.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at this, and I'm seeing the deal and his ability or willingness to finance, and I'm thinking it's top of market right now, but the moment that people realize that there are just as big a deer in northeastern Kentucky right across the river from Ohio, and the moment that some of this development starts coming my way, this land is going to be worth 4,000 an acre in 10 years, almost
Hmm.
guaranteed. I strongly feel that. But what I did was I knew this was going to be a cash flow play for me, so I negotiated the interest rate.
Hmm.
So at the time, I think he was asking, a certain amount per acre, um, which I'm happy to get into, but he was asking for a certain amount per acre, and he wanted 8% interest, I want to say, um, which
What
really
what year?
isn't that bad.
What was the year for that, or what time? Like what?
Your term length.
No. So when you signed the purchase agreement, 15-year financing, this is the price, interest rates 8%. When was that date? I'm just curious how close it was to prime.
That was July of 24. So I bought
Okay.
a year ago, and then I just went back to him a year later and was like, "All right, give me more."
Hmm.
So so
Yeah.
it
So
was
I mean,
probably within a point or two of prime.
yeah. I just googled it here, but July of 24. Actually, it was even a touch below prime. September of 24, prime was 8. So I mean that, and I
Yeah,
think
what he cared about was getting top of market for his price per acre.
because that's a comp for everything else. Well, I just sold this for this. Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And I'm watching him sell these other tracks, which that whole 4,000 acres is almost gone now. I think that there's one more track that I'm really trying to decide if I want to buy it.
Yeah.
But it it
Well, he gets to reset the
every
market. He gets to
That's
reset the market
exactly
every
right.
time. Yeah.
And he's got an agent that's working with him that I really like. I've come to
Mhm.
know that gentleman pretty well. And now he's getting that same price per acre in a 5 mile radius all around that farm. So
Mhm.
he's brought the local comps up. It's kind of been interesting to watch. And what he told me he's going to do, whether he does this or not, I don't know. But after we kind of like, you know, agreed on this deal and like, we signed the contract, he was like, I know what's going to happen is everybody who's bought is like you. They're wanting to buy more land. So I think I might just sit on the last 500 to 1,000 acres, and I bet you in about 3 or 4 years, one of you is going to be willing to pay me 3,000 an acre for it.
Uh-huh.
And it's genius. So from that perspective, I actually have learned quite a bit from the gentleman that sold the land,
Mhm.
because he's absolutely right. in
Yeah.
in 2 years, if I've got the cash flow, I'd probably be more than happy to sign that deal with him.
Yeah.
Um, but point being is, I knew he wanted top of market on the dollar per acre because of what you're saying. And I wouldn't be surprised if he tries to sell the last 30% of it at an even higher price point. Um, and I knew for me it was a cash flow play. So
Mhm.
I want to pay this long term. I don't want to pay it off faster. I just want to steadily pay it off and for the next 15 years. So I want to negotiate my interest rate as low as possible. And that's what I
Mhm.
did. And um, so I ended up getting it uh, quite a bit less than that 8%.
Oh,
And
great.
he got his price per acre. I got the interest rate that I was looking for, but I know that I don't have any intention to pay that off anytime
Mhm.
soon. I'll just let it ride for the next
Yeah,
15
which
years.
yeah, which he's not mad about that either too, because
Exactly.
it's a perfect hedge for him as well. Because all right, Matt, you go ahead and refinance it. Are you going to beat this rate? Well, no, probably not. So
Exactly.
it's a pretty that is really interesting. There's not transactions like that, in my neck of the woods, but that I think for anyone listening, I think what you just described is a true opportunity. I think you nailed a lot of really important things. The travel corridor of the interstate. You have, um, you know, I always think there should be like there's different soil metrics and things of that nature. There needs to be a big buck metric of like, okay, this region has X amount of age class, and like you can create a formula for that. And so finding an area with an undervalued made up formula, what I just poorly described, like that, those are all things that make a lot of sense.
I couldn't agree more. And the biggest factor in this farm, I say farm, it's really not a farm, but that's the only term that feels right to me. I've been thinking about that. It's definitely not a saying property just sounds too commercial to me. It's like it's my farm.
Yeah.
Um, this farm is the 4,000 acre parent tract that my piece got carved off of. It is 4,000 acres of the same contiguous, like 20-year-old clear cut. It's like
Hmm.
in a period of 5 years, they clear cut this thing like 20 to 30 years ago. And it is just not great deer habitat. But when I started running cameras, I had two deer over 150 inches last year on my 160 that I bought last summer.
Hmm.
Had two deer over 160 that were pretty consistent on that one piece. So this year I bought the neighboring piece. So now I've got 506, but I haven't even really touched the habitat side of it yet. So it's a lot of pole timber, a lot of mid story. And I believe that the upside potential for taking that farm, which is in a sea of timber, I mean, there's not a farm agricultural field in 5 miles.
Mm.
So taking that farm and improving it versus taking a farm in, South Central Iowa, the impact that I can have on that farm is 1,000% higher than I could have in a neighborhood that has all the right ingredients for big deer. And I've already got pretty good age class, some pretty good deer. And I believe that with a little timber stand improvement or a lot of timber stand improvement over the next few years, it's got a 20-acre creek bottom on it that I can clear out and probably have. I've checked the soil in that area. It's that creek bottom's pretty good soil. Um, like you plant 20 acres of creek bottom and you TSI those ridges, and I think that place could rival just about anywhere in Southern Ohio. And so to me it's like upside on both ends, which gets me excited.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super interesting. I think there's different types of buyers that I deal with. Of like, I want to buy the most amount of ground at a cheaper price per acre, right? And then I think that makes a lot of sense for a lot of people. And then there's other folks that just want to be like in the quote unquote right neighborhood, or
Yep.
basically the gated whitetail community. So it's one way to
Yeah.
say it. And I think there's two models to that, but I haven't. Was this somewhat reminiscent to your days of hunting Southern Ohio too? You're like, oh yeah, I'm cutting my
It
teeth on this
looks
stuff again.
it looks just like it.
I
It looks
figured.
just like it. And do you know how many days that I was like, a young entrepreneur, like out there, like, man, if I could just figure out how to, and I would be hunting. For anybody that's hunted in northeastern Kentucky, southern Ohio, like in the real hills of southern Ohio,
Hmm.
um, it's some wicked country, and so it's not what you think of when you think of Ohio. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I just remember being hunting that type of country and thinking like, man, if I had 1,000 acres of this, what I could do with it. The really cool thing too, though, is like the agent that brokered the deal. He has he is not a hunter, but he understood that hunters were his target market for this property. The whole 4,000 acres that he's kind of helped market.
Hmm.
Every person, so that property sits in between two county roads. It's 7 miles in between those two county roads. So the whole 4,000 parent tract is in between two county roads, and it's ridges and it's rough country. Um, we maybe have gotten 2 or 3 trespassers in 12 months now across all the neighbors that I keep in contact with on that 4,000 acres. Because
Hmm.
if you were to come off of a county road, it is rough country, right?
Hmm.
So that whole 4,000 acres, we have a 7 mile access road that snakes through between those two county roads. And I have probably 7 or 8 neighbors now in that. And we've actually turned it into a development, like with a name and everything
Hmm.
and it's all based on whitetails. So every neighbor that has bought off of that 4,000 acres, they have a goal of growing mature whitetails. So it's like you're getting a big farm and you have big neighbors and they all have very similar goals. I think the smallest owner um, inside of our group now is maybe 200 acres, 150 maybe.
Yeah.
So that's been pretty cool too.
Yeah. Would you I feel that, I mean, there's a lot of really, I guess, thoughtful things with going the seller financing route, especially as a business owner too. Because if you do have to go raise capital, I mean, you're signing the personal guarantee on that. And I feel that, to your point, can mess up cash flow as banks run numbers, can mess up, debt to income. I know you're probably supposed to report seller finance stuff, but it's not recorded at
Well,
the
I bought
credit
it through
bureau.
the business.
Yeah. Well,
So
yeah,
even
even better.
better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really interesting. Yeah. Did you Would you have ever considered buying, like going the traditional route? Like you mentioned, you would buy a 50. Like, is that pretty much that's a realistic, not a.
I'm still thinking about doing that,
Hmm.
but kind of following Skip Sly or somebody like that's
Hmm.
flipping model
Hmm.
because I really want that farm to be one experience. I want that to be where my family goes and where 4 or 5 of us can hunt at a time. And, and I want to grow mature deer there, but I got 2 kids that are just now into hunting. And,
Hmm.
so I have different goals for that property than if I was to buy 100 in Southern Ohio that I'm not married to, that I can put some improvement into and then sell later. That's probably where I would try to get more. Like I would go cash and try to negotiate the best dollar per acre that I can get, so I have
Hmm.
more margin for flipping that farm, in a few
Hmm.
years. And
Hmm.
I've listened to some of your podcasts. I personally don't think that is the best business model that's out there right now with the price of land and the the uncertainty on where land's going. But not everything that I do has to be the best business model in the world. Some of
Right.
it's just I enjoy doing it, and if I
Yeah.
can make a few dollars doing it, then I might as well.
Yeah. If you can do it and not lose money, then that's a pretty good hobby.
That's
Most
exactly
hobbies,
right.
most
I
hobbies
don't
cost
think
money.
you would encourage, like, I've heard people say, like, you got to get in the game. If you're young, get in the game now. Well, I do think, number one, I think if you're a hunter and you have that ambition, you use that to drive you 100%. But I personally wouldn't tell my 25-year-old self that the best way for you to get wealthy is to buy and sell hunting land right now. Um, Not that it can't be done,
Yeah.
but if it's like if it's a side gig to buy land at the price point that it's at right now and try to squeeze a margin out of it. I don't know. You may know
Yeah.
more about that than I do.
No, I think the market has matured a lot from even episode one of the Lane podcast. So my answer to that question on episode one would be different than what it is today. The amount of calls I have a week, like I just want to buy and sell farms for a living. It's like everyone wants to do that, and that's a problem because and
But
when it makes it
but
challenging.
uh, long time ago, probably right in the beginning of the Exodus days, I think this might have been something that Tim Ferriss, a story that he told. Um, I don't remember who I would attribute it to, but I was listening to Tim Ferriss back in those days, and whoever it was told a story that they went to the Berkshire Hathaway annual shareholders meeting, and they like fought in line all day to make sure that they got up there to
Ask their
ask their
question.
question. And the question that he asked was, I'm a 29-year-old entrepreneur, you know, I just sold my first business. I've got $1 million liquid. What's the best place for me to invest that to ensure the most outsized returns? And Warren Buffett told him, put it in the S&P 500 and get back to work.
Yeah,
And that's kind of how I look at buying farms. Is hear me when I'm not discouraging anybody from buying a 50 and trying to flip it. I just think that that is not going to be the vehicle that gets you to your ultimate spot in life. If you're doing that because you enjoy it and you don't lose money on it and you make a few bucks here and there and it helps, but it's an outlet for the main thing that you're doing, because I need that. I can't like I can go really hard for 100 days at a time, and then I need other things that give me different perspective on life. And this farm that I just bought that's a big part of what it is for me. So if this just gives me that different perspective on life, if it reminds me of what the ultimate goal is, and it gives me more energy to put back into the main thing, what's wrong with that?
yeah,
I'd much rather do that than put it in the S&P 500.
yeah, for sure. There's financial advisors that listen to this podcast and get mad and text me.
Well,
um,
they're going to be mad after that comment.
and so
Not
yeah,
saying that you shouldn't have some money in the S&P 500. Okay.
yeah. But I think I would agree with that. This is my challenge to you, Matt. I want you to keep close track of your holding cost, all your expenditures, and then whenever you sell it, if you do, or you get an appraisal, I want you to match that against the S&P 500.
60 years from now, we're going to have a podcast and we're going to
Yes.
look at
Yeah.
it.
Because that's my rebuttal to the financial advisors that call and get mad. I'm like, and a lot of them
I
are
agree.
involved in land. And I say, okay, you've been involved in land. Which one have you had better returns?
But
Well,
what you can't factor into that equation?
enjoyment.
That 23-year-old kid in me that probably wouldn't have gotten as excited about business ownership and like developing my career if I didn't have that. And by the way, I thought I was going to own land a long time ago. So
Mm.
it's not like I may not have been as excited if you had told me at 23, like, hey man, if you work really hard, 12 years from now,
Yeah.
13 years from now, you can own your first farm. I would have been like, I think I'll just hunt public and hang out and I'm
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. That's
But
an
but
interesting
the
point. Yeah.
but that the light at the end of the tunnel, like every every little setback in my career, I'm really good at convincing myself that if I just do this one thing, I'll fix it this time and I'll get back on the right track. And frankly, that you have to have that spirit in
Mhm.
any endeavor, I think. But
Yeah.
um, there was
There was a
one other point I'm going to make. So I bought this farm in a business that is a disregarded entity owned by my other business. I can also write off the interest. So when you factor that into the whole equation, it's
yeah, your interest
it's
rate's
such a
crazy
no
low. Yeah.
it's such a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And I plan, this is something we could probably talk about on another podcast.
Hmm.
I'm actually really mapping out what I want to do to put short-term rentals on this farm.
Mm.
The way the farm lays out, those county roads, being kind of secluded, um, I can put short-term rentals along that county road that probably won't even affect my deer hunting whatsoever. And then my family's got a place to stay when we're hanging out down there. And
Hmm.
I legitimately believe I can cover 40 to 50% of that land payment just in small short-term rentals
Yeah.
along the property's borders. So there's so many different things, man.
Yeah, I think the opportunity is there for anyone, and it's just like you just got to start the process, and it's like, okay, look at this example from from your experience, first business to now. Okay, all those mistakes, all those different things set you up for the success you find later on, and if you didn't start any of that, you wouldn't have hit those different mistakes, and so I just feel like you just got to get going and realize you're going to make mistakes and learn, and most people are willing to help you too. That's the biggest thing. Like, and that's I don't know. I think that's encouraging. That should be encouraging for anyone listening, I guess.
I agree. And you mentioned earlier today or earlier on this podcast that you had mentioned some of the things that we did at Exodus, 5-year warranty, the theft
Yeah,
replacement.
yeah,
Well, those came from a mindset that was like, what do we got to lose? We've got no business right now.
yeah,
I think that this will make a big enough difference to the market. It's if you've read Alex Hermosi's $100 million offers,
hmm,
make an offer so good that people feel stupid saying no.
yeah,
Well, that was years before that book came out, but that's kind of where we were at, was like, let's just go for broke here. Let's do something so crazy that
yeah,
we just start gaining market share because, and it's not like Exodus became, you know, the number one camera
yeah.
company. So I'm not trying to say that like we did
It
something
was starter fluid.
monumental,
Yeah,
but
it
it
was starter
was, and I
fluid.
don't
Yeah,
think we would have gotten off the ground if we hadn't done things like that. And the
no,
point is that if you were starting a business, just like I think a lot of us when we're buying a farm, we overthink. Well, what if? Well, they want 3,800 an acre, but all the other farms in the area are selling for 37. What if I buy it and this happens or that happens? It's like, just do it.
yeah,
Just do it. And if it does, and you're young enough, you're going to recover way faster than you think you are.
hmm,
And to your point, you're going to be so much more informed than you would have been otherwise. It's like I've probably hired 300 people in the last 10 years of my life, heavily weighted in the last 7 years. I used to overthink hiring decisions so much. And then it's like, just hire and you're going to learn. And now every interview that I sit in, the person that's talking to me reminds me of one of 6 different people that I can think of that, like, they have this quality and they kind of remind me of that person. And that person didn't work out because of this, or that person was really good because they had this quality. And I can tell that this person has that. And you just don't get that intuition until you've made those mistakes over and
hmm,
over and over again. I've probably hired that many people, and I probably could have hired a third if I would have made the right decision on the first call.
yeah,
But you don't figure that out unless you make those mistakes. And um, so yeah,
yeah.
that message we've all heard 1,000 times, but I feel like it's really important in this
I feel like
game.
it has to be heard 1,000 times because people get paralysis by analysis, no matter what it is. I mean, but where do I hunt this morning? I mean, it can be as
Right,
simple as that. You're like, well, it's for everything.
100%. I
Yeah.
don't ever think that stuff anymore, and part of it is I don't care as much as I used to.
Uh huh.
If I go out there and I don't kill that deer this morning, I'm still, because it also, and this is a whole separate topic, but it also, it doesn't make or break my year anymore if I killed a giant, and
Hmm.
some of that's not working in the industry and some of it is just, but yeah. And I don't know. I just think this stuff's supposed to be fun.
Yeah, I think that's a good reminder. Well, is there anything else that you can think of here? Any other parting words? Any interview advice for someone that maybe has a job interview this week?
I think that comes full circle to the story that I told with when we hired you, which is, um, think about the problems that person's trying to solve right now.
Yeah.
Think about what you can do to solve them. You were phenomenal at that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I do give you a lot of credit because one of my favorite stories. My friends still give me crap about this. Is when we were going to launch the ozone deal, and then they put everything to a shredder. Do you remember that? Were
I
you?
do.
Yeah. That's always a funny story. But I think you've had a really good vision and outlook of marketplaces, and like there would be times where people are like, oh, you to me, like, oh, you founded Exodus. Like I always corrected everyone every time. Like, no, I started as an intern because I feel like that you guys, everyone that was there, the original beginning of Exodus was what created a springboard for me of like, okay, like when you go work for a company, you want to have a good product and something that you can truly get behind. And that was what I saw in Exodus, where if like it was a white labeled piece of crap that was going to break in 6 months, like I wouldn't want to go work there. So I think you've really created an interesting kind of a maze of my career where it's like it just goes left, right, so forward, backwards, and so it's been fun, and I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your land journey because I think it's really cool.
Yeah, man. When I get to like $100 million net worth someday, which I doubt that I ever do, but you always have to have that. Like that's where I'm going.
Yeah,
Um, I always think about how you could. There's a dream team there that could take over the hunting industry with so many different product categories, and you from an execution standpoint. Because we were talking about this the other day when we caught up before the podcast, is like one of the biggest things I've learned in business, especially, is like you have people that are vision people and you have people that are executing monsters. And both kind of have to get better on the other side. I've had to really work hard to become better at executing and like seeing things through. But you, Chad, the team at Exodus after I left, incredible executors. And so I think about that a lot of like, man, you could put a dream team together and we could go out there and dominate some stuff. But that's an industry that is not supply constrained. There's a lot of
yeah.
supply, and you got to have a lot of big pockets to go out and make it happen. So
Yeah. Yeah. There's people that do it. There's people that do it. And I tip my caps to, man, my consumer behavior is so much different for anyone that has like a small business, or if I see someone that has like a small product, like I always buy from them. I don't look for a discount code, like, cause I know how hard it is to go and try to do something. And it's like, I
yes,
just have the utmost respect for anyone that's going out and trying to do that. I make a point to always do that. So
absolutely, couldn't agree
yeah.
more. Maybe
Well,
there'll be a $100 million net worth individual listening to this podcast that wants to build that dream team.
yeah.
If so, get at us.
Yeah. You never know. You never know. Well, if people want to, maybe they need some electrical work done, or they want to reach out to you, what's the best way for that?
I don't know why I went blurry. I'm out of focus now, but yeah, you can email me anytime, Matt Kline business at gmail.com. If you need electrical work in a 50-mile radius around Hagerstown, Maryland, check out Klein Electrical Services. I was telling you, I do think eventually I'll launch a YouTube channel for the new farm development,
hmm
and talk about kind of what I'm doing there. But in the meantime, I'm just enjoying the process, man.
Love it. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, sir.
There you guys have it. I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. I think it's fun to hear a entrepreneurial journey. Obviously, I'm partial to hearing those stories. I think it's really fascinating to hear those, and then how they typically tie into land. Obviously, I live in this echo chamber, and if you listen to this podcast, you're also in that same mindset of trying to figure out how can I design my life to enjoy land, buy land, and how have people done that. So I want to say thanks for you guys making it this far, and I also want to say thank you to Onyx for supporting the Land Podcast, along with Moultrie, Hawk Optics, ASM Labs. Those are the tax soil guys, and Painted Arrow. And I'll tell you this, the Painted Arrow, a lot of their products, you don't necessarily just have to use it as a phone mount. I mean, I put mine up in my truck, and I sometimes use it as a GPS. So there's just a lot of cool things that those guys are doing, and I really respect what they're doing. They're out of Michigan, and they're doing it brick by brick. So that is it. Hope you guys enjoy. Tomorrow we have an episode with Skip Sly all about hunting regulations. So that'll go live on the Whitetail Podcast. And then on Wednesday, we have an episode on Wire to Hunt for the Back 40 series. And we're going to have another episode there for you guys too. So if you want to hear some more content, we got 2 more podcasts coming later this week. We'll see you. Peace.